Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show, and today I have a great guest on. Now, one of the things that a lot of people talk about when it comes down to running a business is, the legal side and the finance side are two things that scare them. Well, today we have a great guest on, and she's going to really help make the legal side of running a business a little less boring and a little bit more interesting. So, stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my amazing guest, Kelly. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Kelly, one of the things that really stood out to me, like, see, when my team and I reached out to you, one of the things I really liked is, making the legal side, a little less boring because that is something that I find that business owners are deeply impacted by the legal side of business, but they are very uninterested in finding out about it.
Absolutely. There's so many other things when it comes to running a business, and people generally tend to gravitate towards taking care of the things that they're more excited about, and legal just is not one of those things.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into that. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I have been a lawyer for about 8 years now. I was practicing mainly um, I practiced for a couple nonprofits. Then I worked at a private firm doing a lot of litigation, commercial litigation. And then during the pandemic, summer of 2020, I decided to open my own firm. And now I work primarily with entrepreneurs with their businesses. So helping them with starting up, with contracts, trademarks, forming an LLC, and all that kind of stuff.
Nice, nice. Now, when I guess as you were kind of going through, probably before law school, was being a lawyer kind of a goal or a target of yours?
So it was something that I always kind of thought about. Like I thought I could maybe go that way, especially like during high school and undergrad. But I was not the type of person who, had this dream of being a lawyer and doing some particular area my whole life. Like a lot of other people that I went to law school with knew exactly what they wanted to do and they wanted to do it their whole life. And I was just kind of like, I think I don't really have this burning like desire of something that I know I want to do. So that sounds good. Let's do that.
Awesome, awesome. That probably allows you to connect well with, with entrepreneurs because I find that a lot of times entrepreneurs, the ones that end up being very successful are ones that they found a problem and then they just wanted to solve that problem. As opposed to some that I found that fall deeply in love with their product and they're just not flexible enough to adjust when reality of entrepreneurship starts to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So now one thing I'm curious about is, you went into, when you started working for, a private law firm, what was that like? Because you mentioned about, nonprofit, then going to working for a private law firm. Did you notice some very big differences as you made that transition?
Yes, they were completely different. The For a nonprofit, I was also working mainly in guardianship. So I was working alongside of a lot of social workers as well. So it was just, and we were interviewing families, interviewing people that needed guardianships, either in hospitals or nursing homes or other type of, situations like that. So going from that, which was very, very different, it was just a lot more of that than court, to private litigation, which was going to court every day, spending most of my time with other lawyers and with judges as opposed to other like families and social workers was definitely a huge shift. So it was completely different environments, really.
Gotcha. Now, I guess as you kind of navigated through, working in the private practice, and you started, was there something that really stood out to you that made you think, you know what, it's probably time for me to look at doing this on my own?
So actually, I was someone who was always adamant that I would never start my own law firm because I always said it's just that's going to be way too much work. I can't do it. I don't have the time. I'm not doing it. And then 2020 happened and I was no longer going to court every day because courts were closed, which means I also was not commuting hours a day because I was going to court in downtown Brooklyn and then my firm was on Long Island. So a lot of back and forth. And so I wasn't doing that routine that I was kind of stuck in. I wasn't really like happy in that routine, spending, basically like my whole life in court or the office or finding parking in Brooklyn and not like any time, for myself. But I didn't want to go out on my own because I thought that would be even more work. And I didn't really know like if going somewhere else would be better or if just kind of like legal work would always be like your 24/7 kind of life. But then after courts being closed for a couple months, I ended up getting let go from my firm in June of 2020. And then within a couple of weeks, I was interviewing at other places. And then I just decided, instead of going somewhere else, working all these hours, I'm just going to open my own firm instead. I had already connected with some other lawyers online who were already doing the same thing. So then I just decided that's what I'm doing. And I just started it right away.
Also, also, it's very interesting when I find, the similarities between lawyers and as they start law firms and accountants, like accountants and finance professionals, because I remember thinking of a similar thing of like working 80+ hour weeks, and I was like, man, if I'm gonna work this hard, how do I get more value out of this?
Exactly.
Awesome. So now, when you worked in, something you said that piqued my attention was you talked about, the firm being in Long Island and court being in Brooklyn. Now, is that because that's where the clients were, or is that like the normal commute for law firms in Long Island?
So our firm, we were in Long Island, but we actually had cases every day in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. So we had pretty much like one attorney per borough. And I was living on Long Island, but then I moved to Brooklyn. That way it was slightly easier that at least I was close in the morning. Um, so yeah, it was just the law that we did. We just had courts every single cases every day in like at least in those three boroughs, sometimes other ones as well. So it was just basically because of that. It can really vary depending on what kind of law you're doing.
Gotcha. And what type of law did the firm practice?
So that was a where we had to go every day was a lot of no fault. So, we represented medical providers against insurance companies.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I will say is I've been to New York a couple of times. I've been to Brooklyn. I've never been all the way out to Long Island. So I could imagine that would be a very interesting commute on a regular basis.
Yes, it definitely gets tiring.
And then on top of that, like I said, when you show up, you got to be fresh and you got to be ready to go.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a lot of me trying to run up to the eighth floor every day for court because downtown Brooklyn, the courts was full of the public trying to go in, usually for something else. Um, so it was a madhouse every morning.
Now, looking at your own firm now, I mean, were there some things about, moving into your own firm that you started experiencing and realizing, wow, this isn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be?
Yeah, I was a little surprised, I guess, how quickly I was able to go full time in my firm. When I first started, I wasn't really sure, like, am I going to be able to do this or am I going to have to get like a part time job as well? But using social media actually just allowed me to go full time in my firm right away. And that definitely surprised me. Yeah, I didn't realize that that would happen so quickly.
That's a very interesting point because something I've told a lot of people is I was like, when it comes down to businesses, I was like, I think, law firms have very healthy profit margins and just the ability to scale a law firm. It's amazing because there are so many people that need the service. And with a simple strategy, law firms can really get up and rolling a lot faster than some of the other types of businesses. So, as you started, your law firm, did you start off with focusing on entrepreneurs, or has that kind of evolved over time?
So that was my focus from the beginning. I had already connected with a lot of entrepreneurs previously because so I was actually using my Instagram as a fitness account before going out on my own. So because I was like teaching at different studios and stuff, I connected with so many different fitness entrepreneurs all over, and also just other type of entrepreneurs through them or people that started as a fitness entrepreneur went on to be like a life coach or a business coach or something. So I kind of already had this network of entrepreneurs. So I kind of was just like, you know what? They're all missing the legal. So I'm going to come in and do that.
Nice, nice. Now you mentioned about using social media. So, which platforms did you find to be, the right fit for your type of audience you were aiming for?
Yeah. So I primarily I started primarily on Instagram, and now my two main platforms are Instagram and TikTok. And I've actually even grown a bigger audience on TikTok than my Instagram that I had started first. And for me that works because those are where my ideal clients are. That's where they're scrolling and spending their time.
Gotcha. Now, what was it like for you? I mean, in figuring that out, because one of the things that I find with a lot of lawyers is, marketing and branding wasn't something that they learned in law school, and so how did you kind of figure that out?
I think part of it was that I did have kind of that like leg up of already being in the like social media space before, before I went out on my own. So I had kind of already also seen some of my entrepreneur friends kind of like pivot to becoming like an online like business coach, or so I saw other people talking about starting businesses, working with other, social media managers or coaches or whoever. So I kind of already had a good grasp on marketing and also marketing yourself digitally through like social media. Um, so I kind of had an idea of how to brand myself that way. Um, but it was also very different from things that you see most lawyers doing.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that because that becomes a challenge for a lot of business owners and especially lawyers because I get the sense and I feel like oftentimes accountants are very similar. I mean, and as I speak of that because my background is accounting and finance, and so one of the things that I find is there's almost like this mindset of lawyers have to be this personality or this persona. And sometimes that doesn't go well with what people think about when they think about TikTok or Instagram. So, how did you kind of overcome that?
I think I tried, especially for Instagram, I tried to create more of like a personal brand as opposed to a very like strict, super professional lawyer brand because a lot of people aren't going to be able to relate to that, like a business that just has their logo as their picture and doesn't actually talk and just shares like infographic kind of stuff. And that's, great. And for some clients maybe, they'll like that kind of um, brand on social media. But I knew for like my clients that they wanted someone that can relate to them better. So I knew that I had to like break down that way of how lawyers like typically are, because I knew that they don't want to hire someone that is like, this overly professional, like someone they think that is like overly professional, overpriced, like kind of overwhelming and like scary to talk to, intimidating. So I wanted to make sure to be different from that.
Gotcha, gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense because one of the things that I think about is, you know, from what I have seen from an accounting and finance standpoint is that there's this relatability and trust factor that the clients or prospective clients have to develop with you before they decide to do business with you. Do you find the same thing as that the social media content allows people to kind of get to know you and trust you a little bit more before they have their first conversation with you?
Yeah, I think it does because, it's really that personal brand. So they kind of sometimes see other things from me, not just strictly legal, whether it's like my reels where I like attempt to be a little bit more funny, or like my stories where I talk about my dog, or, that I like work in the middle of the night and hate the mornings. So things that like they end up relating to me on levels that are not just based on the legal. So then they're like more willing to hire me essentially.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, one question I'm curious about, which, I've seen a lot of people, have to figure this out for themselves. When it comes down to TikTok, a lot of people saw TikTok as a platform where you had to do a dance or you had to sing on it. So when you first got on TikTok, how did you kind of, get comfortable enough to say, you know what? I either don't have to dance or I don't have to sing. Or maybe you're an amazing dancer, maybe you're an amazing singer, and so you just went for it.
So actually, I, like many other people, joined TikTok when like COVID first started, and we were stuck inside, and I was like, let me watch all these funny videos. And that was also before I had a business. So I actually was one of those people that was entertaining myself by learning the dances. But then once I started my business, I was like, okay, let me pivot. And I just used the same TikTok. And instead of, I stopped the dancing and I just talked and started sharing tips. Um, and, then I also realized I started like seeking out other business owners and other brands and stuff on TikTok. And I saw that then my like For You page started to like shift. It wasn't just like teenagers dancing anymore. It started to be like more of like, I saw small businesses, I saw coaches, I saw, influencers, content creators. And then I kind of fit in more there. And now I primarily just talk and share tips and stuff. And I had an LLC video. This was actually more than a year ago, and how I like started really growing my TikTok. But I had an LLC checklist video that went viral, like over 500,000 views, and it grew me like my first like 10,000 followers. And so I say, I'm like, if my boring LLC video can like get me 10,000 followers, and now almost like 30,000 as a lawyer, like anyone else can do TikTok if that can happen.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So when it comes down to the types of clients you work with, is there like, what would you say is kind of like some of your ideal types of clients to work with?
Probably usually like online business owners are probably the most ideal clients, the ones that I've just worked with the most. This is usually like some type of coach or course creator, or service provider, freelancer. They are primarily the main clients I work with. So I definitely have the most experience in those types of services and really advising them on all of their different legal needs. And they also differ a little bit because for a lot of them, sometimes their main like part of their brand is not necessarily their business name, because a lot of them are doing business as like their their legal name. So it's interesting to navigate brands that aren't, they're not known by like Nike, the name of their brand. They're known by something else, like the name of their course or their podcast. So it's definitely interesting.
Nice. So if people are interested in doing business with you, finding out more about you, where should they look for you online?
You can definitely find me on Instagram the most, probably, and the easiest. My handle is at lawyer Kelly with an I underscore.
Nice, nice. So how often are you posting on, Instagram and TikTok each week?
So on TikTok, I post at least once a day, but very quick. I just literally talk to the screen for like 30 to 60 seconds. So those are very easy to do. And then Instagram, I usually try to post a couple of times a week on my feed with either posts or reels. And then I post on my story every single day.
Gotcha, gotcha. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one of the questions that I love asking every guest that comes on is, when you think about your history and you think about your story and where you are now, what's two pieces of that advice that you would share with other lawyers?
So I would say definitely figure out what type of client you want to work with, because that is really going to help you choose where your marketing efforts should be, which I see some people struggle with. They don't know what platforms to use or what type of marketing to use. So I think really figuring out who you want to target as opposed to targeting everyone in the world is going to be able to help you get clients quicker. And then another thing also is to the same thing that I tell every business owner, regardless of you're a lawyer or not, is find a CPA as soon as you start, because I feel like your lawyer and your CPA are the people you need to have in your business. And a lot of lawyers, we think we know everything, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, I still am like messaging my CPA to confirm things. And I feel like that helped me also be a little bit more secure in starting and building a certain way, because I kind of found her like right when I started, and then I didn't really have to worry about taxes or anything. She just told me like do this, put this aside, and then I felt better doing, building the business side of it.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, it has been a pleasure having you on. So thank you so much for being an amazing guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You just checked out the Law and Finance Show, where we bring you great, insightful interviews that talk about the business and the financial side of managing a law firm. So subscribe to the show and check out more of the great interviews.